We encourage you to hit the subscribe button right now so you can listen to more podcasts of Operation Truth.
Send us an email, ask your questions, and very possibly we'll address your question on the air.
Operation Truth, the show they don't want you to see. Now, here's your host, Lou.
This is Lou Palumbo. With me today, Tom Fuentes, my co-host, my colleague, my collaborator. I've known Tom for more than 10 years. We met at CNN, and I have warned everyone about him. This guy is extremely well-informed. The end of last episode, we spoke about the Kennedy assassination and what that's really translated to in regards to the way that we're living today. Tom has given you an immense amount of information and insight. He's also an historian, interestingly enough. The thing about the show is we're factually driven and we're telling you the truth. And we don't expect you to be spoon-fed. Go out and challenge us. We want you to do that. We want you to become part of the conversation. We also want you to know you don't have to agree with us. What you do have to do is revert back to the days when we used to have dignity and civility and decency in our conversations, all of which has left the conversation. In any case, this Kennedy assassination, for Tom and myself, we were both fairly young boys when John Kennedy was murdered. I myself went to Catholic schools for 16 years. I had Irish Catholic nuns who spoon-fed us, the Kennedy era. And, you know, I really looked into him further after they murdered him because it traumatized me. You know, it was the end of the innocence of this country. It opened up a discussion about how nefarious this country can be. And the purpose in saying that is to acknowledge that mistake that may be made and go forward. We don't want to beat anybody over the head with this, but we want you to know we've made mistakes. That's okay. We're going to push forward. So, Tom, I want to bring you right into this discussion, sir. I know you and myself are both aware of this Secret Service agent that's come forth to debunk the magic bullet theory. I guess he had, through divine intervention from 60 years ago, some further insight, but I know that you have some insight. Would you care to share it?
Yeah, I don't buy his story. Let's start with that. His claim is that after the presidential limo pulls into the emergency room area at Parkland Hospital, he and Jackie Kennedy's other Secret Service assigned agent, Clint Hill, are trying to get her to let go of the president. She's kind of cradling him in her arms where he's bleeding all over and really already fatally wounded. They try to pull him off. Finally, they talk her into letting go. They put the president on a gurney, take him in for emergency room treatment, and then help her out of the car and walk her into Parkland Hospital. Then this agent claims that he was searching the back seat of the limo, which is covered in blood and part of the flower petals spread around. He saw fragments of bullets on the seat, but then he recovers this whole bullet, which later becomes Exhibit 399 of the Warren Commission. Now, this bullet, we've seen, thousands of pictures of it, is basically intact, except there's just a little bit of the tip of the bullet missing. Very, very small amount. Now, he says he put it in his pocket. When he gets inside the hallway, he decides to put it on a gurney, knowing that they'll find it. And I'm considering right there, that sounds absurd to me. He's a law enforcement officer trained, gather evidence, what to do with evidence. And he puts it in his pocket, just kind of abandons it, key evidence, abandons it on a gurney, and some nurse finds it. And later that gets morphed into by Arlen Specter, one of the attorneys of the Warren Commission, later senator for life from Pennsylvania. Arlen Specter basically says, okay, here's the magic bullet theory. That bullet, because they had a limited number of shots that they were going to allow on the part of Oswald from the 6th floor of the school book depository. So the theory has to be that bullet went into President Kennedy in his back or in his throat and came out, then enters John Connolly's back, takes out about 6 inches of a rib, comes out his chest, then enters the wrist and hits the radial radius bone in his wrist, one of the strongest bones in the human body, shatters that, goes through the wrist, lodges in his leg, where it later falls out on the gurney. Now, you see a picture of this bullet, and it's clear the only way a bullet can be fired and come out that pristine as it did is if it's fired by the authorities into a water tank, to then look at the grooves and lands and see if it matches a particular rifle that it was shot out of. It does not come out of the water. It didn't come out crushed and bent and morphed like it would have if it did any of the things that Arlen Specter theorized that it had done. That's why they call it magic, that it did all of that tremendous damage to Connally in particular, President too, but more so for Connally, crushing all kinds of bones and everything, and then to come out in one piece that pristine. Now later, people that were investigating the Warren Commission and the assassination, guys, author Mark Lane, for example, is one. When they come up with books like Rush to Judgment and all of that, immediately the CIA coins the term, their conspiracy, it's a conspiracy theory, and they're conspiracy theorists. That's where that term originated, in the aftermath of the Kennedy assassination. Now, later, as more and more evidence comes out of the extreme damage done, especially to Connally, and the idea that that could not have been the bullet that went into Connally, X-rays of Connally in the emergency room and in surgery and all during the time he's being treated by the doctors show numerous pieces of bullet fragments in his body. Now, they're not removed because in some of the locations, they figure that would do more damage to him than not. So he lives the rest of his life with many of those fragments. Now, afterward, after he dies, many people want to exhume his body, pull out those fragments, weigh them, and compare it to Exhibit 399, the magic bullet. And they're prevented from doing it by Connally's widow, Nellie, says, "You're not touching my husband's body. Forget about it." And then they eventually do. They don't take the body out. But the doctors themselves say there were enough pieces of bullet in the body that exceed the little tiny piece of bullet missing off the tip of 399. So the theory of that being the magic bullet was debunked years ago, decades ago, and has never really gained credence since then. And that's where the problem comes in. For this Secret Service agent, they show pictures of the back of the limo where it's above the seat in the crease of the leather, where the leather ends and the back frame of the car starts. And he allegedly finds this bullet in that crease, takes it out, puts it in his pocket, and then, marches into Parkland Hospital emergency room. Well, that whole story. And then, to sit on that story all these decades, he's now 98 years old. So he's coming up with this now, that he found that bullet and he put it on the gurney all those years ago, but didn't want to confess to it at the time because he'd be ridiculed or whatever. So anyway, the story doesn't make any sense. And in my mind, it doesn't pass the smell test.
Tom, what do you think the motivation would be in him coming out and making a statement like that? I mean, it's not like he's worried about taking heat at 98, but, why would he come forward and say that he placed that bullet there? But guys, I want to say one other thing before we continue on this, because, this is only part of the discussion around the assassination of President Kennedy. There's a conspiracy driving this. And what we're really talking about right now is the cover-up. And in law enforcement, Tom and I both became very familiar with this notion of it's never the crime, it's the cover-up. But Tom, what's in it for him to do this at this crossroad?
I think just the, one shot at glory, maybe before he dies. I don't know. That could be it. Maybe it's professional jealousy that over the years, all the credit for being the protector of Jackie Kennedy and the hero of the day that Kennedy was killed in the car has been Clint Hill, the other Secret Service agent. He was the one assigned to Jackie. He's the one that was close to the family, and you see him in all the pictures with Jackie and the children and all of that. You see Clint Hill in the Zapruder film. Part of Kennedy's head is blown onto the trunk of the car. And Jackie then climbs up over the seat. She's crawling out onto the trunk and retrieves that piece of her husband's head. And Clint Hill, you see, climbing up the back, pushing her back into the car as the car is going to speed off, 90 miles an hour to Parkland. So over the years, Clint Hill has been the hero, the major player, let's say, in Jackie Kennedy's protection detail. And this guy's been kind of left out of that.
Tom, did you mention the wound at the base of the neck of the president being an entry wound from the front?
Yes.
And the hole in the windshield?
Yeah, later, what happens is there's a bullet that enters around the shoulder blade of Kennedy, goes in only about a half inch. So they're speculating that maybe whoever shot that bullet, it might have been undercharged, or there was a silencer that slowed it down. But the bullet goes in only about an inch into his back and then falls out, and allegedly is never found. And this may be 399 that gets found later. But in any event, Gerald Ford, who's a member of the commission, future president of the United States, admits to doctoring the autopsy photo of Kennedy. He takes the entry wound into the shoulder blade, takes a pencil, and then marks that entry wound at the back of Kennedy's throat to show that that's where a wound went in. The doctors in the emergency room, when Kennedy couldn't breathe, they did an emergency tracheotomy and admitted that they obliterated his neck, which is a crime scene, just his neck, and said in their belief that was an entry wound, the bullet that entered his neck. And then they fix it. Basically, they wreck the crime scene by doing the tracheotomy, which is in vain because Kennedy is fatally wounded. Meantime, what's not talked about, but was talked about by numerous personnel, medical personnel that came out, the windshield shows an entry bullet wound from the front. And many theorized that bullet hit the windshield, and that's the one that went into Kennedy's neck and did the damage, which, among the bullets that did damage to him. Now, what happens immediately after the assassination, no one preserves that car as a crime scene. So the car is immediately shipped off to a Ford facility to replace the windshield immediately. Then they refurbish the inside of the car. A lot of people don't realize that exact car then becomes President Johnson's limo. He has that shit. When he goes around the world traveling, they bring that car with him. It was the car President Kennedy was killed in. And people speculate, why would you, wouldn't you be a little superstitious about riding in that car? But apparently he wanted that car. They had it all fixed up. Ford, they've interviewed the Ford employees that replaced the windshield, and the inside, refurbished the interior of the car with all the blood stains and everything in the leather to get that all cleaned up for President Johnson to use as his car. So everybody, the magic bullet theory has been debunked for 60, 70 years. The idea that he came up with what is now Exhibit 399 of the Warren Commission, the magic bullet, is pretty absurd, actually. Now, the other thing about the doctors at Parkland is that those doctors in the emergency room later say that President Kennedy, the entry wound was in the right temple, and a grapefruit size hole was blown out of the back of his head with about half his brain missing, and a big chunk of the skull came off, which is the piece that Jackie Kennedy recovers off the trunk behind, it's at the rear of the car on the trunk lid. So, that whole idea that you have these bullets coming from different directions completely debunks what the Warren Commission is trying to do. Now, in fairness to the Warren Commission, when President Johnson commissions Supreme Court Chief Justice Earl Warren, wants him to handle this commission, Warren didn't want any part of it. And there's recordings of Johnson telling him, the country depends on you. We need to make sure that we come up with one lone gunman did this. That's your job, because we don't want war with Cuba or Russia or anybody else, Soviet Union at the time. And they're under strict orders. Meantime, to protect the CIA, Kennedy had fired CIA director Allen Dulles, and his top three assistants, they're out. And he makes the claim that he's going to blow the CIA into 1,000 pieces and destroy it. So meantime, when he's killed and the Warren Commission is formed, who do they put in charge of the Warren Commission investigation? Allen Dulles. And you have so many witnesses say, including this Secret Service agent, saying, you were never interviewed by the Warren Commission. So you have all of these people in close proximity to the killing and don't even get interviewed. What they want to say doesn't enter it. And a number of the doctors later claim that they were threatened when they gave statements that the wound that hit President Kennedy came from the front, which completely debunks that it's from the rear, from the school book depository, that they were threatened. Secret Service agents and threatened with taking away their medical license if they didn't change their story to go along with the Warren Commission story.
The world is in crisis, with political unrest and financially unstable countries trying to print their way to prosperity by taking on trillions of dollars of new debt. It's incredibly concerning. That's why you need to own silver as a hedge. So call today to receive the free hard asset information kit on how easy it is to own silver. Green energy demands will possibly turbocharge silver prices to 50, 100, even 300 an ounce, according to many experts around the world. Silver is a proven hedge against inflation. Since 1971, silver has returned over 11% when averaged yearly. Silver is a proven wealth preservation for hundreds of years. Hard Asset Management is a trusted leader in precious metals and rare coins for nearly 40 years. We have the guaranteed lowest prices, fast and easy ordering, expedited shipping, with award-winning customer service available 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. CST, Monday through Friday. So protect yourself from the chaos. Invest in stability with Hard Asset Management. Call now and get your free Hard Asset Management information kit on how easy it is for you to own silver. 844-426-4653. 844-426-4653.
Tom, can I just say one thing about this discussion, which is incredibly just full of information that's people need to understand and consider. You know, what's so disturbing about this episode with John Kennedy, it's the first time we really exposed how dark the heart of this country can be. And you and I have had a number of shows following the initial discussion of the Kennedy assassination, tracking and tracing each of these administrations, if you recall. And we got up to, I think, George W. Bush. You know, we have to come to terms with how dark the soul of the government can be. I mean, you know, I said when we started out today that Kennedy assassination was the precursor to what we're living today, you know, and it's very sad because I think up to that point, no one could ever envision the fact that we would kill our own president. And that's something that is factually being considered quite heavily. Now, I do want to say something interesting. I've worked for Michael Franzese, who I know you know who he is.
Yeah.
He's a capo in the Colombo crime family. His dad,
Right.
Sonny Franzese, was the underboss. Michael has a podcast, and I plug into it occasionally.
It's an excellent. I watch every one of his. They're very, very good.
Well, he's quite a character. He's really a good guy, too. I mean,
Right.
we both know he walked away about 30 years from organized crime and lived to tell about it. And I can tell you what he told me as to why that is, and simply stated, they're either dead or they're gone. You know, they're in jail, dead or in jail, he said. But he used to get heads up from the FBI when he was in LA initially. But Michael says unequivocally, without question, and he knows organized crime was involved with this. And the other tie, Tom, and I think you can speak to this perhaps more keenly than I can, was the CIA's employment by our government, the organized crime people's employment by our government to kill Castro. So, you know, we strange bedfellows, to put it to you politely, Tom. But I think if I had to guess, and that's just a guess, it sounds as if our CIA and our organized crime people both had a reason to eliminate John Kennedy and collaborated. I'd be curious.
Military. And the
Well, the military industrial
Military
complex, which you've
industrial
spoken about
complex.
before. Well, we started to really start to understand what it was, and then we witnessed it in high gear in Vietnam. You've spoken about this on this podcast before.
Right.
But it's so tragic because, you know, I have this thing about life. You're going to make mistakes, Tom. We both know that. The key is not to beat people over the head with them, or even yourself. Learn from them and forge forward. We seem to have an inability to do that for some reason, and I don't understand why. I mean, is ultimately all of this going to lend itself to our demise? Is that the path that we're on? And sadly, I'm starting to wonder, is that what it's going to be? Why don't we just turn turn the corner and start to do things a bit differently? But that
I think you're right. We are on that path. However, it's not an accident. The people that are steering this ship are doing it on purpose. And you could start with the current administration and the current heads of the various agencies and the people that they take orders from. It's on purpose to bring down the United States. The placement of all these district attorneys by the Soros people, funding through PACs, through circuitous routes to get the money into their coffers, is on purpose. Their mandate to not prosecute and bring down our cities, destroy the fabric of our cities, is not an accident. That's their policy. The fact that the cases don't get prosecuted demoralizes the police. So they want to either leave or go somewhere else because they can't do their job. And so you have this cascading effect. So when you talk about going to New York, and it breaks your heart to see your hometown being destroyed like this, not an accident. Not an accident. I have the same feelings when I go to Chicago and see my hometown being destroyed, or my beloved FBI that I spent 29 years and see them destroying that on purpose.
Tom, who's supposed to benefit from all of this? You know what I'm saying? In other words, I got the memo here. They want to destroy the country. The problem they have is they're never going to disarm this country. You know, I don't think they understand what the long-term reaction can be to this thing. But I say this all the time. I go, who's supposed to benefit from, 10 million people crossing the country illegally and basically invading our cities? And you know what's also interesting in this discussion? What a grave disservice we do to these people we're letting in. There's no place for them here. We can't employ them, although California is talking about a form of unemployment like $400 a week for illegals because you can't employ them. But, you're giving them hope where they may not be hope. Number one, we may have massive deportation if the right administration gets in 2024, or even worse, a pushback on the migrants. At some point, people are going to inherently develop a resentment towards them. We watch these knuckleheads go after people who are of Asian descent when the virus hit. You know what we're talking about. We watch these knuckleheads when the buildings came down, go after people who appeared to be Middle Eastern, even when they weren't. I know the episodes they had, for example, in Arizona. Who's supposed to benefit from all of this? Who's supposed to benefit when you destroy every major city in this country? You're destroying its economy.
They are.
The question is, who is
to stay in power?
Tom, but but what good will it do them if we don't have a country to operate in? They're not going to redefine this country in that sense.
It won't be much, but they'll be in charge, and that's what they want.
Tom,
they'll have control. And I think that, to add to that, I think that the persecution of the J6 people, giving them sentences like 20 years or more for basic, and in some cases didn't even go in the building. So they obviously couldn't have beat up a police officer or done damage or any of that. And to give them these kind of sentences, the idea of that is for the future. It's that as the country, as conservatives, as middle America, as the silent majority get more and more disgusted with the policies that are bringing the country down, they're also being told, do you want to end up like a J6 guy, 20 years in prison just for thinking bad thoughts? Just for protesting? That, they're taking away the incentive that you can even peacefully protest and theoretically get away with it. That's you got to get away with it. It's no longer your constitutional right to exercise your First Amendment right to stand outside the Capitol and say you don't like what's going on. You're liable to, just from being outside, you're liable to end up 20 years in prison.
Tom, I hear everything you're saying, and I agree with what you're saying, but I want to say this as well. I don't think they're really ready for what the potential pushback is from the public. I go back and remind everyone how heavily armed we are here. You know, I brushed up against people without disclosing where, that they have tripod mounted 50 caliber machine guns and another weapon known as a BAR, which is a full automatic 30-06 caliber weapon, extremely effective, or Thompson submachine guns. You know, we have a lot of class 3 states here. Ironically, Tom, New Mexico happens to be a class 3 state, by the way. I don't know if you're aware of that. I did a little research on it because a lot of our states still are. And what that really is, ladies and gentlemen, that's your ability to apply with a $200 fee, I believe it still is, requesting a tax stamp from ATF so you can go out and buy a full automatic weapon.
Right.
I don't think the American public, Tom, is going to go gently into the night. I don't see it happening. I see potential secession. I see people pocketing in areas that they will break off from the government and govern themselves. But here's one other thing, Tom. All the people that are the architects of this today, and it's a minuscule percentage, ladies and gentlemen. This isn't the heart of the country. This is a minuscule percentage of the population that's disrupting this country. They won't be here, Tom, to reap the benefit. I don't know what the hell they're thinking about.
But that's what I said earlier. The Bolshevik Revolution in Russia was a minuscule percentage of the Russian population, and they took over and basically imprisoned the entire population for how many decades? You know, through Lenin and Stalin and Brezhnev and all of their leaders until Gorbachev, when the Soviet Union doesn't collapse and fall apart until 1991 into 1992. So I think that getting back to J6, I think that's why you see the government just going after anybody in any way they can use, finding bank records, who made a charge in the District of Columbia that day, phone, geo-tracking, all of the efforts that they've used, the FBI in particular has used to go after these. And the idea of it is kind of what prosecution is in the first place, intended to deter other criminals. This whole J6 episode is designed to deter all of the people out there that you're talking about. And they may have guns on tripods and all of that, but many of them are going to be thinking twice of, you know, can we get away? Are we going to do this? Maybe, maybe not.
Tom, you know, Tom, I have to say, you know, my mom's a Southerner. It's no secret. I'm born and raised in the city of New York. Take a good look, folks. My mom was blonde hair and blue eyed from Arkansas. She was Scotch Irish and Cherokee Indian. And I mean a lot of Cherokee Indian. I think there's a demographic in this country that's going to push back. I think at some point, this could be a potential scenario that someone from the federal government steps out to take somebody into custody and they end up in a shootout and lose, because it's possible, Tom. You know, that could spurn something, number one. Number two, I'm unfortunately starting to see little blurps under Trump's name about don't surrender, no surrender. You know, I know what happened January 6th. I understand this mechanism that the government's employing to deter you. They want to terrify you into, I guess, behaving the way they want you to behave. And you and I both know there were some people that went into the Capitol and misbehaved. But my assessment is there were people in there taking pictures of the damn thing, you know, but they created the media, once again, created the optic on that particular incident in the manner in which they chose so it could sell their narrative, period. We got the memo here. But the reality of the situation is the drums are beating, Tom. Something that's worth looking into. Ready? Back in the early 90s, we had about 3 militia groups. We have over 50 now. And a lot of them are from military backgrounds, and they're fairly well trained, and they train. There's a lot going on in this country, which is why it's critical, if ever before, that we have a voice of calm that can galvanize this country, that can be all-inclusive. That's the thing I go back and say about John Kennedy. This guy had some skill set. Of course, the population was half of what it was, but when he spoke to the country, he spoke to everyone. We have to include everyone in this conversation. You know, I don't want to go off on this tangent about transgender people. I ran around with them in Studio 54 in the late 70s. We went to the bathrooms. Everybody went in the same bathroom. I don't know what they're talking about today. They missed the memo on this one from almost 50 years ago. But even they need to be included in the conversation. You know, if whatever it is that drives them to abandon their birth gender, guys, you got to make a place for them. Give them their own bathrooms, their own sporting events. Ostracizing people doesn't make them go away. You know, you have to open your mind and accept people on the terms in which they come. We're getting a little foggy here, and I didn't mean to go off on a tangent with you guys, but when you go into our schools And I watched this Senator John Kennedy, who I love this guy. He's just, this guy is hilarious. Get into a discussion about the graphic contents of books being supplied to our children, with people being bent over and lubrication being applied to their anatomy so they could penetrate. Guys, this is your country. I'm going to say this to you. All politics aside, you go near our kids, you're going to get a completely different reaction from the American public. I'm watching out in California, in areas like Glendale and Chino, where the parents are coming up and they're going, that's enough of this nonsense. And these are Democrat voting areas. So this is going to get interesting. But the moral to the story here, guys, is we need to put forth or bring forth a voice of calm and I would say galvanize this country, because if all you want to do is be at each other's throats every day, which is what the media does. Once again, the media has us pitted against each other and at each other's throats, then we're gonna reap the fruition of this. Better yet, our children are. We're going to take a quick break. I want to bring Tom back, and I want to ask him, this Secret Service agent that just came forward, is he a whistleblower? We'll be right back, guys. Stay with us. This is Operation Truth. We encourage you to become part of this conversation. You don't have to agree with us. You have to understand what our mission statement is here. We want to change the conversation in this country, and Tom and I intend on changing the direction this country's going. OperationTruthOfficial@gmail.com. Be right back, guys.
Silver is a proven wealth preservation for hundreds of years. Hard Asset Management is a trusted leader in precious metals and rare coins for nearly 40 years. We have the guaranteed lowest prices, fast and easy ordering, expedited shipping, with award-winning customer service available 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. CST, Monday through Friday. So protect yourself from the chaos. Invest in stability with Hard Asset Management. Call now and get your free Hard Asset Management information kit on how easy it is for you to own silver. 844-426-4653. 844-426-4653.
We're back, ladies and gentlemen, and with me, as always, is Tom Fuentes, co-host of this podcast. You know, I hate to constantly remind people, but I've spoken about this border issue so many times in a redundant manner. The reason I'm doing is if I say it enough time, maybe you'll get the memo. You know, maybe you'll understand the scope of this problem at the border the same way the people in the city of New York do. The people in Los Angeles are going to. The people in Massachusetts being concerned. I do want to remind everyone, we sent one busload of 50 to Martha's Vineyard, and they deployed the National Guard and then figured out how quickly they could get them out of there. And that's a Democratic voting base there. And I'm not anti-Democrat. You know, you hear Tom and I speak, and we need to be clear about something. We would be, as I don't want to use the term harsh. We're not trying to be harsh. We're trying to be truthful. Sometimes the truth just hurts, and it is harsh. If these were Republicans, we'd be equally upset and animated as I can get sometimes. I don't really care about your political affiliation. I care about the direction and the future of this country and my children. I don't panic much, guys. In fact, I never panic. I'm almost panicking because I see the direction this country's going, and I see what we're leaving our children. And I mentioned in an earlier podcast, suddenly we have some people in the world of entertainment or the media, depends on what you want to reference it as, concerned about the future of our kids. Guys, you're destroying the future of our children. And I spoke to you guys about how we brand them at Generation X and Z. The country's redeemable, but I want to get back on topic with Tom and ask him his opinion about this Secret Service agent being designated a whistleblower. Tom?
Well, I don't know what whistle he's blowing or what he's bringing out that everybody was common knowledge. Normally, you have a whistleblower come forward and say, here's what the government did behind your back. Here's what they did, you know, the operations they were conducting, and you don't know about it. Or the whistleblowers in the from the IRS and the Joe Biden investigation saying we were held back by the prosecutor, David Weiss, and this happened and that happened and nobody knew about it. That's blowing the whistle. In this situation, he's saying what's been common knowledge for 70 years, that there was no magic bullet. And yes, Exhibit 299 is claimed to be the bullet that went through everybody. And now he's basically debunking that, saying it didn't go through anybody. It was in the limo the whole time. And then he puts it on a gurney. But you know, is that really blowing the whistle? I don't think so.
Yeah, I have a tendency to agree with you there, Tom. You know, Tom, I want to segue into something that's I find really curious because I know they've gone after Donald Trump hot and heavy, and I want to make this real simple, ladies and gentlemen. If Donald Trump did something to compromise the security of this nation, he needs to be held accountable. And Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden and any number of these characters, regardless of their political affiliation. We're not taking sides here, folks. We need one set of rules universally applied. But what happened to this special counsel looking into, I think it's 1,800 classified documents, Tom? Is that the correct number that Biden has spewing about? I mean, and the fact that
he
he took them
apparently
as
went to the same law school as David Weiss, slow walked the investigation till all the, statute of limitations or everybody that was familiar with it isn't around and nobody knows about it and all of that. So you had that happen in the Hunter Biden investigation in Delaware. They slow walked it till the statute of limitations ran out on the more serious charges like the income tax evasion. And you look at this case now, special prosecutor that's doing the Biden investigation, they might as well put his picture on a milk carton because nobody's going to know who this guy is. Nobody's heard from him. We have no idea of the progress of that case. And it's not the same as in Trump. Trump had the Presidential Records Act in his favor. He was the president. Biden at no time when he took these documents was the president at the time. He was either vice president or a U.S. senator. He had no business having possession of those documents.
Tom, where is James Jordan, and Jim, what's this young man's name? Jim Jordan and James Comer. Why aren't they talking about this every day? You understand what I'm saying?
Well,
In
I
other
think
words,
they are. If you
I don't hear him talking, Tom, I don't hear him talking about these classified
I hear him on
documents.
almost every show, almost every day, talking about what they're trying to do in the investigation or how they're being obstructed. So I think that most people have pretty much tuned it out. They don't want to hear. I have friends of mine saying, "Oh, I've heard these guys every day talking about what Hunter did, what Joe did, or any of this kind of stuff, or how they're being obstructed trying to find information." The latest thing is when it comes up within the last couple of weeks that Joe Biden used several aliases. And he had phones under those aliases and email accounts using them. And at the time he was vice president, he's sending emails to Ukraine and he's copying his son Hunter and doing this activity. So, the House committee subpoenas the Records Administration, archives, saying, we'd like those emails. And they say, no, we're only going to give them to you if President Obama gives us permission to release them. Otherwise, you're not getting them. They admit that Biden had sent over 5,400 emails using aliases. And oh, by the way, we're not going to give them to you. So every step of the way, what would normally be a simple process to get a document or to get a file is like pulling teeth. They have to waste all this time, all this resources. And I think ultimately that led to the McCarthy to finally say, actually two things led to this. McCarthy finally says, okay, we're going to have an impeachment inquiry. I think the real push was, if you remember back in January, when they were trying to decide who's going to be the Speaker of the House, Matt Gaetz from Florida leads a group of representatives that they finally give in to vote for McCarthy to be Speaker, but they want it noted that they can remove him. They can issue one document to say, that's it. We're going to challenge your position as Speaker of the House. And I think in the last couple of weeks, Matt Gaetz has done exactly that he's let McCarthy know, you better initiate this inquiry or we're going to take you out. And I think McCarthy finally gives in and says, okay, don't take me out. I'll do that.
What's so sad, Tom, is that none of this is good for the country. Going after Trump isn't good for the country. Going after Biden isn't good for the country because it's highlighting some really serious flaws in the people we trust to run the country. And I'm not specifically pointing to one person. I'm saying everyone. We're at a crossroad right here. There's another question I have, Tom. When the American public sees that there's no accountability on the federal level and that people are breaking laws, what do we do if they suddenly turn around and go, guess what? You don't enforce the law with the people in Washington, D.C. I mean, Hillary Clinton, for God's sakes, under subpoena, and I want you to correct me if I'm wrong, and the public needs to know this, under subpoena, acid washed 33,000 emails and then damaged electronic devices that were under subpoena. Is that not true, Tom?
Yeah, Hillary broke the law from day one when she became Secretary of State. She goes to the head of IT at the State Department and says, I want my own server, I want my own computer, I want my own equipment. I don't want it to be on the State Department system, the State Department grid. That's against the law. And this guy told her it was against the law. She did it anyway. And the reason is, under the Federal Records Act, if you're conducting U.S. government business, you have to do it on a U.S. government device where the record of that business is archived and can't be destroyed. You go back to Iran-Contra with Ali North. He thought, oh, I'll delete this stuff off my files. No, it's in there forever. That's why. And so now Hillary decides if it's on my personal computer or my personal devices, I can destroy it and no one will ever get it. And that's what she does. But it was already a violation of federal law to even start using those computers to conduct State Department business, which she did. She didn't want it shown that she was commingling the immense profits they were making on the Hillary, or actually the Clinton Foundation, all of the business they were conducting, which also dovetailed into pay to play for a State Department. And she wanted to keep that to herself and nobody to get that. And nothing, you have Comey start this whole nonsense by saying, oh, no reasonable prosecutor would prosecute her. You have a number of former U.S. attorneys say they'd prosecute that case in a heartbeat, like Joe DiGenova, who immediately was giving interviews saying, you know, he had been the U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia, and he had been a special prosecutor, and he's saying that's false, that every prosecutor would have done that. She flagrantly, blatantly broke federal law and got away with it.
You know, Tom, the other issue with Mr. Comey is the fact that it's not the prerogative of the investigator to determine if we're going to prosecute. The investigators produce a product and they hand that over to the prosecutorial arm of government, whether it's a local DA or a U.S. attorney, and they make the determination. You know, but what's so astonishing is there is no line they won't cross when it comes to offending our sense of decency. No. And once again, you know, it's a cover-up and it's a lie. And people, I don't know if you know this or not, I worked for Monica Lewinsky. I'm not going to get into a dissertation about the Clintons. Long story short, there's trouble. There's a problem here, guys. I would encourage you, if you want to learn a little bit about our president, look into this woman, Juanita Broderick. Start to look at some of the interviews and statements she gave to law enforcement about Mr. Clinton. You know, it's so interesting because there are always two sides to people. There's that side in business, and that's their personal life. And as long as that part of their personal life doesn't break the law, you know, it's your personal life. You have the right to kind of do whatever you want to do. And if you're smart, you'll guard your privacy. You don't have to lie. You don't have to wave your finger. You know, it's nobody's business who he had a relationship in the White House. And quite frankly, I didn't elect him. We didn't elect him to do that. But this whole issue with the Clintons is quite troubling. And Mrs. Clinton is so smug. You know, I have to tell you something, and I shouldn't say this, but I'm going to. In the Secret Service, her security details a form of punishment. The Clintons don't exactly have a great reputation with the Secret Service. Mrs. Clinton is a bad player. I don't care who you are. I'm not saying this because I'm telling you the Republicans are wonderful, because they've got their problems too. But Mrs. Clinton is a bad player. Period. End of discussion. She's a pathological liar. I watched an interview. I believe the journalist was Mike Wallace. Asked her, do you always tell the truth? And her response was, and I watched this, guys, I try to. That's not exactly the response we're looking for from an elected official or a Secretary of State. Guys, you need to embrace the truth here. I have no bone to pick with Hillary Clinton because she's a Democrat. There's a problem with this woman. I don't care who you are. If you would like to challenge me, come on in, have a discussion with me. And I know Washman Schultz is attached to her at the hip. The same person that went after Robert F. Kennedy, by the way, in these hearings, accusing him of anti-Semitism, and in the same breath, Jayapal, Tlaib, and Omar are spewing anti-Semitism. What planet are we living on? But you know what I go back and say to you guys? I remind you and remind you and remind you. The country is distracted. I'm imploring the people that are the architects of this show to get us out to our young people, first of all, because we owe them an explanation. Whether or not the big people understand that, we do. We've destabilized this country. We've destroyed every foundation they need to believe in. We need to get this back on track. maybe we could get them back into an alignment of thinking that would be consistent with their future if we just went out and started to speak to them in an intelligent, open, honest manner and take responsibility for what we've done to their future, guys. This is what's so wrong with this country. We're immersed in lies. And the other word I like before we go today is pandering. We've cornered the market on pandering, guys. And the people we pander to the most are our women. Don't get me rolling on this one. You know, I just watched this guy, Danny Masterson, who was on the 70s show, Ashton Kutcher, Mila Kunis, that show, gets sentenced to 30 years. I should tell you the people that have raped women getting 3 years and 5 years. I've got a case with somebody, 10 years he was released. Guys, I want to explain something to you, and I didn't mean to go off on a tangent with you on this thing. Sexual assault is not a crime of fruition. It's an illness. It's untreatable, period. You touch a woman or a child in this capacity, you go to jail for the rest of your life. And in my instance, although I'm not a proponent of the death penalty, although many of you would think I would be, I am not. There might be some exceptions to that. You assault a woman, I wouldn't mind if they took you out of put you out of your misery. The reality of it is, even if we medicate you, you'll be okay until you come off your meds. Tom and I were both police officers. When people come off their meds, you're dealing with a whole different person than a person who's on their meds. We pander to our women. We need to legislate new sentencing guidelines with sexual assault. The other one is, if you smack a woman, maybe we should put you in jail for 3 years and give you something to think about. Maybe that would give you enough motivation to stop putting your hands on our women. It's something I would tell you I've never done, nor will I ever do. And I have to be honest with you. I got cracked in the face a couple of times. Tom, don't be smug. I know you have too. Don't deny it. I got smacked a couple of times by girlfriends. Not for anything bad. I just think they wanted to do it. I don't know what, maybe they got that rise out of cracking me one. But in any case.
You know, I was thinking more in terms of an arrest situation. You're trying to arrest people in a car who had done something bad, and a couple of them happened to be women, and then they resisted. I wasn't thinking of it in terms of your dating problems, Lou.
Don't get me into the whole commando routine discussion again. Okay, we went down that road. It does deal with my dating issues, but even I have to tell you, and I'm sure Tom and I are like-minded, I didn't use any level of force that wasn't necessary. If we arrested you and you complied, you're fine. If you attempted to hurt me, I would use a sufficient amount of force to impress upon you why that would not be a good idea. And I think that's just something that resonates through law enforcement, whether the public likes to understand it or not. You guys don't live in our world. You don't understand this underbelly in our culture that we protect you from, that we insulate you from. You're quick to judge us, but you should walk the streets with us. You know, I propose that one member of every family in this country spend 2 years in a police department and let them go back and tell the families exactly what it's like to be a law enforcement agent. And guys, let me say this so we're clear. We need reform in law enforcement. We need better training, better training, better training, better training, better training. We need better candidate selection, better compensation, and we need training and training and training and training and training. That's what we need, guys. But don't look down your nose at us, because these men and women put their lives on the line every day for you. And you have no idea what it's like to see a young man who's a police officer with a bullet in his head. It's quite an interesting experience. Tom, I'm going to give you the closing remarks today, sir, and then we're going to wrap this show.
No, I think, all of that's well said. And if I could just go back and make a comment about Hillary, not let that go. You know, what starts the trouble with Comey is that Bill Clinton gets on an airplane at the tarmac in Phoenix, Arizona, with the Attorney General at the time, Loretta Lynch, who theoretically is overseeing the investigation of Hillary Clinton. And as a result of that, they claim, their 30-minute meeting on the tarmac, they both claim, they just talked about golf and children and grandchildren, stuff like that. Nothing political, nothing, urgent. And so anyway, based on that, she says, okay, I really can't make the decision now on Hillary. So Comey takes it on himself to make a decision which should have gone to the Deputy Attorney General. If she can't make the decision, then her deputy at DOJ is the one that should make it. It still should be a Department of Justice decision about prosecuting, not the director of the FBI. Now, by him asserting that no reasonable prosecutor would prosecute this case, he guaranteed that she wouldn't be prosecuted. Because if another prosecutor reasonable prosecutor did try to prosecute, her defense would be, I called James Comey to the stand. Did you not say nobody should prosecute? Yes, I did. Case closed. You know, that would be her defense. His stupid remark sabotaged that case that they could never make again against her. So between Comey and the decisions made by him and others and the current director, you know, we've watched the slow progression of the FBI going from hailed as the best law enforcement agency in the world to a point where about 60 or 70% of the American people think it's not effective anymore, don't regard it with the level of respect they used to. And for me, after 29 years in the FBI and drinking the FBI Kool-Aid that it is the greatest, and traveling to 90 countries around the world and hearing from them, even to this day, that they think the FBI is the greatest in the world, to watch what's happened in the last few years with the selective prosecution of conservatives or others, I think is just so beyond tragic, frankly.
And the closing thought for today is, if you listen to Tom and myself, with the help of TJ Stone and Brian Williams and a number of other individuals, we're trying to get this cuckoo back in the clock, ladies and gentlemen. We're not here selling politics. We're not here selling contention. We're selling you the truth. We just want you to take a look on your own. Challenge us. Do your own, become your own investigator. Guys, that's it for today. Tom, I thank you for joining me as always.
Thank you, Lou.
I forgot to mention Christian Briggs also, who brings a lot of insight into what's going on with this economy and this transition into digital currency. This is something you guys need to pay attention to. And I know we're distracted. Pick your head up and listen for a second. This has been Operation Truth. I encourage you to become part of this conversation, Operation Truth Official at gmail.com. And we'll see you next week.